Okay, I'm filming this a second time, which is sort of a bummer, but what can you do? Here I am, just sort of my first attempt to get this on the needle. I ended up taking it off and starting over again, which you will see in a minute. This has been a very interesting process to make something that I know people are going to be watching me make it. I guess it's a type of stage fright almost. But in this video, we're going to make the neckline for that Blythe raglan sweater. It's a free pattern that I found on Ravelry, and I will have a link to it in the description. As you can see, I did a slip knot, and now I'm using what I call it is called the long tail cast on. That's my favorite cast on because it's pretty stretchy. It's not the easiest one to do. There's a lot of much easier cast ons. So if you're newer to knitting, you might want to check that out. I'm using a size 00 needle, and I'm using crochet thread number 10. You could also very easily make the sweater with a size 0 or a size 1 needle, and with sock yarn or fingering or lace weight yarn as well. So here I am, I'm casting on the stitches. For this pattern, the first row you cast on 24 stitches. So I'm going through the process of doing that here. And, like I said, doing knitting in front of an audience, it's very new to me. I mean, I've gone to yarn shops, but of course that's very different. Okay, here I am counting them all up. I think I did not have quite enough here, so I ended up adding more. Another thing you'll know when I'm making this is that I knit English style, meaning with my right hand. I am left-handed, and a lot of the time I like to knit continental style with my left hand. But I have found with this type of knitting, just knitting really fine, sort of fiddly doll clothes, I prefer to knit English style versus continental, which is interesting because I am left-handed, so you would think I would have more control with my left hand, but as it turns out, it's easier for me to use my right hand. So that's my preference for doing this kind of knitting. Okay, and here I am casting on, I've casted on for the first row, and here I am doing the first row of knitting. This was a knit 1, purl 1 cast on. And for the first row, I just did a regular knit 1, rib 1 cast on. For everybody who's knitted for any period of time, you always know that the first row after a cast on is always a little tricky because it can be a little tighter. So just try not to cast on too tightly, because especially if you're working with thread or a really thin yarn, you are just going to make a really tough situation for yourself if you cast on really tightly. So just an FYI there. I know some people who tend to cast on really tightly will do things like they'll actually cast something on to 2 needles, just like double it up, and then slip it on to 1 needle afterwards. So if you are somebody who casts on really tightly, that's sort of a trick to do a looser cast on. And you see here I'm going knit 1, purl 1. Again, it was strange to do this in front of an audience. I guess I have stage fright knitting, I guess. I don't know. I guess I'll get more used to it as I do more of it. And here you see me going knit 1, purl 1. The ribbing or the neckline for the sweater consists of 4 rows. And you don't do any increases or anything like that for these first 4 rows. Now here's where I deviated from the pattern a little bit. For the next 3 rows, I opted to not just do a traditional knit 1, purl 1 rib. I decided instead to do twisted knitting, twisted knit 1, purl 1, and you can look that up online, twisted ribbing, if you want to see a clear example of that. But the reason I decided to do twisted ribbing for the next 3 rows is because I found with this type of knitting, it gives it a much tighter, neater look. I noticed that in a lot of Japanese patterns for doll knitting, they prefer you to do a twisted ribbing, and it really does make it look better. Now, that being said, doing twisted ribbing, especially at this scale, is not a whole lot of fun. But the good news with this pattern is you never end up doing more than 3 or 4 rows of it at most. Okay, here I am almost at the end of the first row. There we go. All right, and now I'm going to start the second row. I'm going to turn it around. Make sure that I have the piece of thread that's coming from the ball. We've all made the mistake of accidentally knitting the second row from the tail, the first or second row from the tail, and that is always a nightmare. And at least I usually end up starting over. So just make sure that you have the thread from the tail, or not the thread from the tail, thread from the ball. And to do twisted knitting, basically you knit it's knit purl, just like before, except you do the knits, you knit through the back and you purl through the front, twisting the stitch. And it just looks really, really nice in doll knitting, especially if you tend to knit when you're making ribbing. It tends to be loose, which is a very typical problem for knitters unless they pull really tightly when they're knitting, which is not something that I do. So this works really well for me. In fact, I'm actually thinking about incorporating it into just knitting my everyday knitting, like knitting someone a hat or knitting a sweater or something like that. So anyway, here I am. I'm going to be finishing up this row. I'll speed it up in a second if you want to watch the rest of it. But you do this row of twisted knitting, and then you do 2 more rows, and then you are done with the neckline. And I will see you in part 2. Bye.